What up, Reapers? We got another simple video for you yet again. Moving Platforms Part 2. In this video, we're going to be using timelines instead of components, and we're going to learn how to create game loops so we can keep our feature going. And then we're going to revisit the 3D widget and the create child classes, so nothing new there. However, this platform is going to be different than the previous one because we're only going to have a starting point and an end point, but it's going to be smoother. It's going to be slower toward the points and faster in between, and then we're also going to delay it at the starting point and the end point. And this way we can kind of leave it in people's way a little bit longer. So this one is going to be a really fun one, so let's go ahead and let's jump right in. So open up that content drawer, and we want to create a blueprint class of type actor. And we're gonna call it BP moving platform. And if you follow along with the last video, don't call it this, go ahead and call this one delay, so you don't have any naming conflicts. And then go ahead and open this up. And just like in the previous video, we need a static mesh, and I'm going to do the same type of static mesh in this one. I'm going to add a cube in the components panel, cube right there. However, I am going to name this one platform because this is going to be our base class, and we don't want to have any confusion of what is what. So I'm going to rescale this cube over in the details panel. It's going to be 4 in the X, 4 in the Y, 0.2 in the Z or the Z. And now we have the same kind of setup that we did in the last video, but instead of a component, we're going to head over to this event graph over here. And before we get started, just highlight these two right here, the begin overlap and the tick, and we're going to delete them. We don't need them. Let's get them out of our way. Okay, so before we get started, I want to kind of play through a thought process of what we're trying to do here. We want to move something from point A to point B over a duration of time, and we want it to be a smooth effect. Okay, so we can use what's called a timeline for this. And some of you probably already used one before, but if not, we're going to learn about them now. So right click on the graph and search for add timeline. This guy right here, timeline node allows values to be keyframed over time. A value over time. That's what we're looking for. So add that there. We're going to call this movement. Movement. And go ahead and sync these up. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to double click on this movement, open it up, and we're going to see this new tab. This toolbar you see right here, don't worry too much about it unless you're really familiar with it. We're not going to use that in this video. So we're only going to worry about the length and the track. So the track, I want to half this because we're essentially just going to reverse whatever we make in the up direction. We're going to reverse it back. Or I guess not really the up direction, but you get what I'm saying. So I'm going to half it to 2.5. And then in this track, I'm going to click this button, and I'm going to choose this float from this drop down menu. And I'm also going to call this movement. And you'll see why in just a moment. Okay, so this is our graph here. This is the time in this direction, and this is the value in this direction. We need 2 points. So there's 2 ways you can add it, or that I know of. You can right click and click add key, or you can shift and left click. Shift and left click. There goes my whatever. Anyway, so this first point, we want this to be 0 and 0. We want it to be a value of 0 when it starts at 0. Okay. And in this value, make sure you hit enter because it doesn't always enter the value the way this one does when you tab over. So just a little note. And then this one, we want it to be a time of 2.5. So we want it to be the end of our timeline, and we want it to have a value of just 1. And then if you click anywhere in the graph so you have nothing selected, these 2 arrows, if you click them both, will put all of your points equally on the screen. Okay, so now you see we have this point here and this point here, and we have a straight line. This is pretty much what the interp to movement component does, and I want it to be a smoother motion, kind of like an elevator, how it slows down at the end point and the start point, and it speeds up in between. So what we can do is with these points highlighted, we're going to right click and we get this drop down. Right now it's linear, so it just goes in a straight line. I want to put this auto so it kind of just makes this nice curve you see here for me, because I don't think I could do that on my own. And I think that's perfect, and this is all we need to do with this timeline. So go ahead and compile it, and let's go back to our event graph. and you'll see that we now have this movement node. I forgot to point it out before, but we only had update, finished, and direction to begin with, and now we have our movement node, which is what we just created. And what we want to do is we want to update the value of our platform with this node here. This is going to update whatever we pass on to it as the timeline goes. And then we want to update it with the movement value. So go ahead and click and drag your platform onto our graph from the components panel over here. And then what we want to do is we want to search for set relative location, because we want this to be relative, again, to the default scene root, not the world. So we want it to be relative. So we want to connect these up. Okay. And so what's going to happen is this function is going to be ran every time it gets updated, every time it moves along the graph with this new location that we need to provide. So what we need is an interpolation of some kind, and we want it to be linear, essentially. So if you drag backwards off of this, and if you just search for linear, you're not going to find it. Like, this is a really weird one. I had to look for it in Google search. So we're actually looking for a lerp is what it's called. I don't know why. I mean, if you have over, linearly interpolates between A and B. That's why it's called a lerp, but you would never know otherwise. And we want this vector one. So select this. Okay, and let's give us a little bit more room. Okay, so what this does, let's highlight over this again. Linearly interpolates between A and B based on alpha. So this alpha is a float, and it's actually this movement float. And we gave this a value between the 2 points 0 and 1 over 2.5 seconds. So it is going to pass at whatever point in time that value is going to be, it's going to update this. Okay, so let's head back over here and hover over this. In parentheses, it says 100% of A when alpha is 0 and 100% of B when alpha is 1. Well, alpha is going to start as whatever movement is, and we're going to start it at 0. So when alpha is 0, we're going to be 100% of A. So the center of where we put this in the world. Then when alpha is equal to 1, so at the end of the 2.5 mark, it's going to be 100% of B. So whatever we put here. So as a demo, I'm going to put 250 in the Z or the Z. So what's going to happen is while this is 0, it's going to be here. And when it gets to 1, it's going to be all the way here. So it's going to slowly over 2.5 seconds move to this point in time, or this point in the world. So if we compile and we head to our level and we drop this guy in here, and when we press play, we'll see it move. And if you notice, it starts slow, goes faster, and then slows down toward its point. So that's what we're looking for. That's the feature the functionality that I wanted to kind of give it a more realistic feel of a moving platform. But as you also probably notice, it only moves in one direction and then it stops. That is okay. That is what should be happening now, and I'll explain why. So head back to our blueprint. So the reason why it's going there and stopping is because we don't have a game loop yet. So it's updating, it's getting there, and nothing is making it start again. So we have this finished node, and that's what this does. So when this is all the way finished updating with its timeline, its length, this guy right here, then it kicks off with this finished node. And what we want to do is when we're done and we get to the end of play, we want to reverse it, because it will literally reverse this right back. So we don't have to do any more thinking. We put the functionality in one direction and then we reverse it back. And that is it. So you might be tempted to do what I first did and try to just connect it, but you can't connect the same nodes. You can't connect pins that are on the same node. So what we need to do is we need to add some kind of node to keep this going. And we mentioned that we want a delay. So, well, I don't think I actually mentioned that. It's in the title. We want to add a delay that's going to stop between A and B. So when it gets to the endpoint, it stops for however long we want, and then it moves. So we're actually just going to search for a delay. Okay. Let's put 1 second in here so we can actually see it being delayed. And then with this completed node, we want to plug this into the reverse. And then add in a couple reroute nodes to keep it clean now. And you might be wondering why I didn't do that handy dandy feature where I use the R key. Because when you go backwards and you use that reroute node like that, it gets really weird. So I tend to just connect it and then add in my reroute nodes, because really what it's doing, it's coming in this way and then it's coming out that way, and then it's connecting in here and it's coming back like that. It's really weird. Anyway, a little bit of a tangent. So with all of that, let's go back and look at it in action. So go back to your level and look at your platform. It's going to go up and then it's going to come down. And then it's going to stop. You probably, didn't you say we're going to have a game loop? Yes. And let me explain why this is stopping. Before we move on, I like to make sure that we all understand what's happening before we move forward. Okay, so what is happening is we're playing it the first time. We're doing all the updates, and when the update is finished, we're running the finish node. We're coming through the delay, and we're coming back to reverse. And then when it gets to reverse, it runs its update, it does its finished, it comes back right to reverse. Well, the timeline is smart enough to know where it's at, and since it's already been reversed, it would be from the start. And since we're not at the start, it's done. It's not going to do anything. In fact, it could even be updating the background. I'm actually not entirely sure. It could just be sitting here and reversing constantly, which would be wasting resources, and the fact that you're not seeing anything happen, so we're waste. So how do we fix that? What we need to do is we need to add in some type of loop, right? We need it to switch between play and reverse constantly, and we don't want to think about it. So there is a node for this. So if you drag off from begin play and you search for flip, move that out of the way, flip, flop, then you'll get this node right here. Alternates between A and B outputs starting with A. So if you select that, if you dragged right from here with the begin play already connected, it will just automatically connect these nodes for you if you did not know that. And it connects us right to play, which is what we want. And then we want B to come to reverse. But before we do that, here's another little trick if you didn't know. If you hold the control key and left click, you can actually drag this pin and bring it right over there so it's nice and clean. Then connect your B to reverse and clean this up. And now we will have a game loop. So if you can compile and go back and press play, you will now see that it goes up, pauses for 1 second, comes back down, pauses for 1 second, goes back up, on and on and on and on. So there is our moving platform. And you're probably like thinking, hey, cool, I'm going to dip out now. But if you didn't notice, there is a big flaw with this already, two of them. One, we don't get to really control where we put the endpoint just yet. And two, we don't have control over the speed. So it's always going to run at this speed, and we don't want that. And you may have already been wondering that from the beginning. I didn't want to point that out just yet. So we're going to fix those two things. So real quick, let's actually promote this variable, or the delay duration, to its own variable. Let's call it delay duration. You can call it whatever you'd like. That way we can have this for every instance. So speaking of, go ahead and click that eyeball so we make it instance editable, so that every instance can have its own delay if we wish. Now we also want to have that 3D widget from the previous video. And I only want it for B because we know that A is going to be its starting point, and I don't need the extra clutter. So I'm going to promote B to a variable, and I'm just going to call this endpoint. Endpoint. Okay. Clean this up a bit because we like clean code. Okay. So with this delay duration, this endpoint, don't forget on this right side, the details panel, edit instance editable, so we can turn on the show 3D widget. Okay, and then if you compile and you go back, it gave us this. That's pretty much all that did. But now we can drag around and move it wherever we want, right? Okay, so head back to the blueprint, because now what we're going to do is we're going to add the final feature here, and we're going to add the possibility of slowing this down or speeding it up. So if you look on this left side here in our components dropdown, you will see we have this movement timeline component. And if you drag and drop, you can get it or set it, just like regular components. We want to get it. So this movement here is actually this timeline. This gets created and added to this left side here as soon as this timeline gets added to the graph. It's like a chicken and the egg situation. So, but now that we have it on the graph and it exists, we can now do some stuff before it actually runs. So what we want to do is if you drag off of the movement and search for play rate, and we want to set the play rate, connect these up. And what this essentially is doing is telling this movement how fast to run. And you might be tempted to do like the set new time or this one here. I had some weird issues with these where the actual like points didn't really run where you expected them to. It was really weird. I don't know why, but I found that using this set play rate here and setting the rate, not a time, actually just took this time, and let's say we put 50% of this, right? So 1/2 of this, so 0.7, or what would that be? 1.25 seconds. It actually would keep these points equal. So this would still be at 1.25, if that makes sense. So we still get the same functionality that we desired. Okay, and we also, because we want to make each platform different, we're going to promote this play rate to its own variable, play rate. And we're also going to make it instance editable. And so right here, this is, let me get it all on one screen so you guys can get a screenshot if you need to. But this right here is our new moving platform. I like this one a lot better because it's smoother and it goes from one point to the other. You can put delays in between. So if you want, I don't know, obstacles to take 1 second before they jump out of the wall, you can do that, or make them hang out outside for 1 second and really kind of play around with some features, right? So if you compile all this up, go back to your level, and if you press play, nothing's really going to change here, except it's broken because we forgot to actually give it a default play rate. So just like before, 0% of anything is still 0, so it's not going to move. So let's fix that bug. Things happen in real life, so make sure the play rate, you set it to any value you want as a default, and then if we head back to our level and press play, it'll work. And then if you want it to go slower, you can edit this play rate here. So I want it to go a little bit slower, so you do 0.5, half it, and then you play it, and then it'll go slower, or the other direction. Okay, so that right there, that is our moving platform. If you don't want to, if you already watched the last video, then you know what we're about to do. We're just going to extend this to child classes so we can have multiple. So if that is good enough for you, I appreciate you. Hit that like button, smash the subscribe button, click the bell, you know the deal, all those things. Leave some comments, let me know how I'm doing, things I could fix. But if you want to hang around, let's hurry and add the child classes. So I'm actually going to rename this, and I'm just going to call it base. Okay, and then I'm actually going to leave this one. We don't need to do one that's all platform by itself, and I'll show you why. So if we create a child blueprint class here, I'm going to call this one pillar again, like we saw in the last one. So delay pillar. And then if we open this up, since we just called it platform, it's not going to be as confusing. So we can actually just highlight the platform and then change its static mesh for this specific child. So cylinder. Okay, and then we actually need to set these back to the 1 values, and then we also want to make this one. We had 7 last time. So you compile, and you'll notice this one now actually starts us. I mentioned last video, if you want to set it here, you can, because it's personal preference. It makes no difference on the feature. So with that in place, compile, save it up, and then you can come and then you can set in your platform, turn it at an angle, the whole dealio. And this endpoint, right? You can move it up, move it around. But see where this starts? It's going to instantly jump out. So that's kind of what I was talking about the last video. See, it jumps out. Maybe you don't want it to do that. So you can actually just leave your center point in the center here, because now you just need to do this, because it's going to move to here. That's a really odd angle. So let's just kind of bring it up a bit. And then you see, then it moves and it slows down, stops, it pauses, and just like that, you have a little bit, I don't know, I like this a little bit better for your moving platforms and certain ones, if you don't need to have multiple points of like taking it in an L shape or maybe an X shape or whatever have you. So that is it, you guys. That is the platform moving to. As always, I appreciate you, Reapers. Happy coding, and we'll see you in the next one.